first question I have here is, why didn't Oak Park Police report the teen drinking party to local and newspapers? The incident was not cited in daily police reports.
Thank you for the question. No, really, thank you. We typically don't make reports to the media regarding citations such as that or parties such as that. There's certain things, there's rules as regarding what we do report out to the media that we're looking at and revising, and our objective, near-term objective, is to become more communication friendly using the tools that are out there. So we're trying to develop methods to do that, but typically things such as parties or rowdy gatherings that happen in parks and that sort of thing, we don't report to the media.
Okay, thank you. How many people have died from overusing marijuana? Who would like to address that one? Is there a number for that?
Where?
Yeah, that's all I have. I'm going to guess maybe in our community.
I don't think people die of smoking marijuana. It would be usually that if they have a medical problem that happens with it is because it's probably laced with something, or they had an allergic reaction. I don't know if we really have documented, I don't think in my research I've seen any like overdose of marijuana.
I think you heard from a student tonight that perhaps use doesn't kill, but it sure can be a slow way to die. He's turned his life around. You've heard from his own testimony how much that means to this young man. If I fear what happens to the youngsters that don't have the support that he had from home and really go into their teenage years and perhaps even into college and never come home because the use of marijuana leads to something else. And so there are all sorts of ways you can look at that question. Sometimes death is the easy piece. It's living a life of misery that you've created for yourself that really can be tragic.
And the other piece is that there are people who get hurt every day because of the trafficking of marijuana. That there's a lot of money interest in it. There's a lot of illegal activity around it, and in and of itself, it's an illegal activity. So it attracts money, it attracts people who have high interest in that money, who are criminal, who are willing to do great violence. That woman that I mentioned has now been fired from her job because she had to seek asylum from her own country. And guess where she came to seek asylum from? She came to the United States. I find it ironic that one of the reasons why she is not safe in her home is because there's a ton of money pouring from our country into her country supporting people who behead chiefs of police. And she came to us for safety. There's something really twisted about that whole man there.
I've got something to add. It's with the intervention team, and we work with all the youth involved in gang drugs and violence in both communities. So I've been involved, I've known a lot of the youth that have died over the years, the last 13 years, and been to their funerals. And the ones that were involved in drugs, that are drug specific, most of them were drug specific. I mean, and all of the youth, besides using other drugs, used marijuana. I mean, so it wasn't just marijuana that killed them. They were drinking, they were using marijuana. They had graduated to heroin or harder drugs, and they were around violence too. So, there's all, it's not just one thing. It's just a spiral, a combination of all these things, to the point to where, these are illegal substances, okay, revolve around violence. So, they're going to find violence. I mean, this is part of the lifestyle, okay? So once they get further down the road with it, the addictions become stronger. They will be involved in that. They will be around that. And a lot of times, some of these youth, they've died, is that they were partying or hanging out with some of these friends, And they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, but, this is what happens in these environments. And, shots were fired. We had that happen just recently, where some Oak Park kids were in another community in Chicago, okay, suspected of dealing with drugs or trying to get some drugs, and they were shot at, and they got lucky. Okay, so this happens.
I would remind folks that tonight we're talking about elementary and middle school youngsters, and there's an awful lot of research right now about how the brain works, much more research than we've ever had before. In addition to perhaps illness or, God forbid, death, I get concerned as an educator about helping our kids to have the capacity to learn and become what they can be, and the potential of our students is something that we ought not underestimate. We need to help them reach adulthood with all the advantages we could possibly give them.
Thank you. The next question I have is, what do you recommend the parental consequences should be if, I guess what they're saying, if the parent catches an 8th grader with marijuana?
I would, as an educator, I would hope that the parent would seek assistance from some of the expert help that you've been talked about tonight, and that you not just sit on it for either fear of repercussions or because one might be embarrassed by it. The most important thing to do for your youngster, if you confront him and find, or her, and find that they're utilizing the substances, to get them help immediately. Don't risk it. You don't know what can happen with the next use. I've had a number of youngsters in my previous school district where we had high school that graduated, went off to college, and never came home. A number of them, not one or two, 3 or 4 in the number of years I was in that setting. I can imagine that those parents, some of whom had admitted later that they knew the youngster was using alcohol, wish that they had taken stronger action the first time that they found the youngster in use.
I'd say that's one of those times where all hands on deck. So minimally, you want to have a medical intervention where you have a substance abuse screening. And pardon the pun, but there's no such thing as one roach. You need to get a full assessment and get involved in that, and get really up your surveillance and monitoring of your kids' activities in every way that's necessary. In terms of what type of discipline consequences, I would just ask you, what are the rules in your house about these things? Do you have rules in the house? There were more parents thought that they had discussions with their kids about drugs than the kids thought parents had discussions with their about drugs and alcohol. And do you have that conversation more than once? Because the messaging that your children get around drugs and alcohol is thousands of times a week. All you gotta do is watch a Super Bowl or any sporting event to see how many times they get positive messages about drugs and alcohol. Or watch any TV show in prime time and see how many times they get positive messages about illegal drugs and alcohol. They're getting that message constantly. How many times this week have you talked with your kids about alcohol and drugs?
Okay.
I would say just one more thing.
Okay,
We have a program here for that. The basic program, that's one place. I mean, that's a beginning place. My opinion on this is I speak to kids about this all the time. And for parents, don't be a hypocrite. I really say that to you. I have a lot of kids that, the parents are smoking pot themselves, and they think that their kids don't know, or they're hiding it. Okay, and trust me, by the time your kid's 12, 13, you know where your stash is. I just had this happen the other day where, here I am going out with the police, and the parents trying to kick the youth out of the house, and the young girl is saying, you know what, Mom, you really want to go there, kind of thing, and fine. What about you? You're smoking pot too, So, if be a good example, okay? It's not what you say. That's the message, and it's what you reinforce. Okay? And then, it starts at home, it continues at home. You've got to be a good example.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and this one is particularly directed to Commander Williams, and it's long. I see dozens of minors smoking cigarettes near OPRF every day. School resource officers, my beat officer, and other police officers tell me they cannot enforce the state law prohibiting possession of tobacco by minors until the Oak Park Police Department puts procedures in place. When will that happen? The law has been in effect since January 2010.
Good question. We see it, and our typical approach on something like that would be a warning or something to that effect. What we're looking for, what the police department is looking for, is the ability to do enforcement in local court. That is to say, you know, we have an adjudication court in Oak Park where we can refer minor cases to, or low-level cases to, that can be heard in Oak Park by an adjudication judge who's concerned with local issues, and the appropriate step can be taken. So we're looking at having a mirror ordinance like the state statute regarding possession of tobacco. Our problem is we have such an ordinance regarding the sale of alcohol and tobacco to minors. We don't have anything regarding simple possession. However, there is a state law on it. We are looking for a means to enforce a local ordinance so that these matters can be referred to local adjudication court. So the way we handle it now typically is we'll say, you know, we'll tell the kids you can't smoke here, put the cigarettes away. You know, it's illegal to have cigarettes in the state of Illinois, and that is our typical approach. Did I answer the question?
I think they were wondering when a policy was going to be put into effect, or a procedure was going to be put into place when they would be enforcing.
Right. Well, we are working on such a procedure now. We're working on obtaining the ability to cite people, take cigarettes. You know, you can't just take stuff away and from people, you know, the constitutional protections, unless you're in fact you're arresting someone. So we're looking on adopting a procedure so that we can, in fact, take enforcement action and cite people. It is one of the tools. Currently, we use it as a tool in order to be able to approach gatherings and break up disturbances and that sort of thing when we don't have anything else. Typically, we're looking for, we're at the scene and we're dealing with that issue as a side issue for something else. Usually there's some other reason why we're approached and dealing with such issues. Kids have been smoking around the high school and in the alleys and in the parks for quite some time. And there are regulations against that, and we have cited people under park district ordinances for violations of that nature. So, it's coming. We're working on it.